Off the coast of Hispaniola, there was an island where the rules of the world simply stopped. Tortuga was not a kingdom, not a city, not a nation. It was the place men crawled to when they were done obeying, when they had nothing left to lose or everything left to prove. And in the 1600s, that made it one of the most dangerous patches of Earth on the planet. Ships came hungry, for profit, for revenge, for shelter, for a clean start. What they found instead was something far stranger than a port, a society stitched together by violence, desperation, and raw opportunity. No crown claimed it, no church survived it, no law lasted long enough to be taken seriously. And yet, from this brutal little island, pirates, buccaneers, and fugitives helped reshape an entire ocean. The terrifying part is not that Tortuga existed. The terrifying part is how fast it became a world of its own, and how easily people let it happen. The question is, who gave it permission?
At first, Tortuga wasn't famous for pirates. It was famous for being impossible to control. The island's broken terrain, its ragged cliffs, its tucked-away coves, its hidden beaches that seemed to swallow ships whole, made it perfect for people who wanted the world to forget them. Hunters who'd run from bad debts, sailors who'd abandoned ship, deserters with blood still drying on their hands, men with exactly one plan: disappear. Many were buccaneers, wild, weather-beaten frontier hunters who butchered cattle and smoked meat long before they ever became the pirates of legend. Historical records suggest they were drawn by survival first, plunder second. That detail matters, because Tortuga didn't begin as anyone's pirate fantasy. It began as a dump for the unwanted. Then something shifted. The Unwanted looked around at the island they'd been hiding on and had a single world-changing thought. If nobody owns this place, maybe it belongs to whoever's willing to take it.
Spain claimed the Caribbean with paper, flags, and grand declarations. But paper doesn't stop hunger, and declarations don't man a garrison. For years, the great empires had more coastline than soldiers, more gold than they could guard, and more enemies than they could name. Tortuga sat directly inside that weakness, like a splinter in a wound nobody wanted to admit existed. Spanish ships sailed past, French interests circled, English rivals watched from a distance, and in the confusion, the island became something the mapmakers hadn't planned for: a gap. A blind spot, a place where control simply failed to arrive. That failure was the invitation. Once a few armed men settled there and survived, others followed. Once the coves proved useful, they became valuable. Once violence started paying, violence multiplied. The empires didn't build Tortuga, their neglect did. Their absence was the foundation. And by the time any of them turned around to notice, the island had already changed hands in all the ways that actually mattered. But what kind of society grows out of that kind of chaos?
Tortuga's power didn't come from castles. It didn't come from armies or crowns or charters. It came from the harbor. Ships needed things: water, timber, repairs, food, gunpowder, and somewhere, anywhere, to sell what they'd taken. Tortuga became the answer, a marketplace for danger, a place where a captured vessel could be stripped bare in hours, where sugar, tobacco, silver, tools, hides, letters, even maps changed hands like everyday cargo at any ordinary dock. That's the disturbing truth hiding inside all the romance. Crime became infrastructure. The island's economy wasn't separate from piracy, it was built entirely around it. Every barrel moved, every torn sail repaired, every coin that hit the table made the whole system stronger and harder to dismantle. And because the port depended on raids, raids became routine, expected, necessary. History doesn't always announce its turning points with explosions. Sometimes it starts with a dock, a ledger, and a single quiet question: how much is a shipload of someone else's blood actually worth? Then the violence moves inland.
People imagined pirates as lawless because they had no rules. The reality is far more unsettling than that. They had rules. They wrote them down, enforced them. A man's share of the loot was counted to the coin. Injuries received in battle were compensated. There were actual charts. Stealing from your own crew could get you punished faster than raiding a merchant ship ever could. On Tortuga, trust was a weapon, and betrayal was how you died. Men lived shoulder to shoulder in wooden rooms thick with smoke and sweat and the particular kind of fear that comes from knowing exactly how the men beside you were capable of behaving. They formed fragile brotherhoods, not out of warmth, but because one storm, one ambush, one infected wound could end everything. They needed each other to stay alive. That need was the only law. But that kind of order lives on a knife's edge. The same crew raising glasses tonight could be raising blades by morning. And once a place normalizes violence, once it becomes the air everyone breathes, every promise starts to sound temporary, every alliance starts to feel disposable. Tortuga wasn't a free world, it was a pressure cooker, and pressure always breaks something eventually.
Behind the raids, behind the treasure stories, behind the cutlasses and the flying flags, there was another Tortuga entirely. A raw, exhausted island of hunger, disease, noise, and ordinary human suffering. Taverns filled fast, rum dulled the fear, dice clattered across wet tables, fights ignited over nothing, and somewhere between the shouting and the drinking, ordinary lives tried to continue, tried to persist inside a place that had been built on pure instability. Women lived on this island too, though the historical records are thin and often warped by the men who wrote them. That absence is its own kind of statement. Tortuga's mythology celebrates men with swords. The real island was dirtier, more crowded, more fragile. Wounds festered, fever moved through the population like it had somewhere to be. Hunger always returned, after every feast, after every successful raid, after every brief season of plenty. For all its brutality, Tortuga could never escape the body. Everyone there had to eat, everyone bled, everyone slept somewhere at night and wondered if they'd still be breathing by morning. And that was when the island's deepest weakness finally became impossible to ignore.
Eventually, the Empire stopped pretending not to notice. If Tortuga was helping privateers tear apart Spanish shipping lanes, it wasn't an inconvenience anymore. It was a target. Raids begat counter-raids. Shifting alliances fractured. Naval pressure began closing in from every direction, and the island that had existed in a comfortable blind spot suddenly found itself at the center of everyone's attention. Governors arrived, then were removed. Flags changed, authority kept showing up late, like a man sprinting toward a house fire after the house was already ash. Some accounts describe full occupations, others describe expulsions, sieges, brutal transitions. The details shift depending on the year and the ruler, but the pattern never does. Tortuga was too useful to abandon and too violent to truly hold. Every power that reached for it believed they could finally be the one to discipline the island. None of them could hold it for long. And beneath all the smoke and the chaos, something even darker had already taken shape. An idea, a practice, the quiet, monstrous understanding that human beings could be bought, sold, and replaced just as easily as any other cargo. This is where the story stops being romantic. Tortuga was tangled inside the wider machinery of colonial violence. The Caribbean was built on forced labor, on plantation wealth extracted from suffering, on maritime predation that ran in every direction. Pirates stole from empires. Empires profited from slavery. The lines blurred in ways that still make historians uncomfortable. Some men on Tortuga were escaped laborers. Others were the ones doing the capturing. Some traded goods. Others traded human beings. The historical record doesn't support a clean hero narrative here,
only a brutal one. The island wasn't outside the system. It was one of the system's wildest, most unguarded expressions. And that is precisely why it survived as long as it did. Tortuga didn't endure because it was free. It endured because the world surrounding it was already violent enough to need it. But the strangest part of this entire story isn't the violence. It isn't the piracy or the exploitation or the shifting empires. It's that even now, with centuries of research behind us, historians still debate how big Tortuga actually was. The legend of Tortuga is larger than the archive, and that is a problem. Some accounts inflate the numbers, battles become grander, names become larger than life. Simple historical events get varnished into myth by the novelists and filmmakers who came later. What we can confirm, Tortuga mattered. It was inhabited, it was contested, it served as a genuine base for buccaneers and privateers across different stretches of the 17th century. What we can't always confirm are the more dramatic versions, the ones that have seeped into popular imagination and made the island feel like something out of a film. And yet, the uncertainty doesn't make Tortuga smaller. It makes it larger, more haunting. Because when the records blur, the island becomes a mirror, reflecting every fear people ever carried about what happens when civilization loses its grip. Was it a pirate republic, a criminal frontier, a colonial staging ground? The honest answer is probably all three, depending on the decade and who was doing the looking. But the real mystery, the one that doesn't go away no matter how many archives you search, isn't what happened there. It's why so many desperate men were willing to risk everything just to reach it. Tortuga wasn't only dangerous because of the men on it. The island itself was trying to kill you. Hurricanes could shred an entire fleet in a single night. Ships that had survived raids and battles and naval chases, reduced to splinters by weather. Rain rotted supplies. The roads were steep, the terrain unforgiving. Fresh water was never guaranteed. A mistake in the wrong season, a delayed supply run, a storm at the wrong moment, and a crew that had survived everything else could find themselves starving before the next raid ever came. This matters because survival was never a given, not even for the predators. A pirate ship looked powerful from the water. On a failing island in the wrong season, that power could evaporate overnight. And that vulnerability shaped everything. Men who arrived at Tortuga chasing freedom usually discovered something else waiting for them: dependence. They depended on weather, on captains, on fragile alliances and stolen food and luck that never held forever. In a place like Tortuga, the sea wasn't an escape. It was just another enemy, one with patience enough to wait offshore until you made a mistake. Over time, Tortuga became the soil from which larger legends grew. Famous names from the wider Caribbean world of raids and privateering passed through this place, though exactly who and when and in what capacity depends entirely on the source and the period you're looking at. What is certain is this: Tortuga helped construct the stage. It provided the ships to join, the harbours to shelter in, the targets to chase, and above all, the reputation to build on. That is how myth actually works. It doesn't begin with glory, it begins with geography. A hidden island, a protected bay, a place where the desperate gather, where the bold find room to rise, and where enough men have survived just long enough to start telling stories. The stories grow. A single successful raid becomes legend, a brutal captain becomes folklore, a harbour becomes the centre of the world, or at least the centre of a world that runs on fear and silver. And before long, the island is no longer just a location on a map. It becomes an idea, a symbol, a word that makes people feel something before they even know the history. But ideas can be destroyed, and the empires had begun planning exactly that.
By the late 17th century, the world had stopped waiting for Tortuga to fix itself. Colonial powers had grown more organized, more patient, more determined. Naval forces got better. Trade routes were fortified. The old hidden gaps in the map, the places where men could vanish and operate without consequence, kept shrinking. The island didn't fall in one single dramatic moment. There was no last great battle, no final burning. It unraveled. Men drifted away. Some slipped into legal privateering, trading the black flag for official papers. Some were hunted down. Some vanished quietly into other ports, other wars, other stories nobody bothered to write down. Tortuga's era of wild, ungovernable freedom ended the way most violent eras end, not in a single explosion, but under the slow, steady weight of pressure closing in from every direction at once. The island that had once seemed untouchable became, in the end, just another contested patch of land that the empires finally agreed to take seriously. And when the noise finally faded, when the last ships left and the last fires went cold, what remained was almost worse than any battle: silence. But silence on Tortuga never meant peace. It meant the ghosts finally had room to speak.
Today, Tortuga doesn't look like the center of a criminal empire. It looks quiet, sunlit, beautiful even. And that contrast, that gap between what it looks like now and what it once was, is precisely what makes it so unsettling. Places don't forget what they were just because the wind has softened their edges. The docks are long gone, but the absence remains. The coves are still there. The cliffs still face the sea the same way they did when dangerous men stood on them and watched for sails. The island carries its history the way old scars carry weather, quietly, completely, without complaint. Most visitors see coastline. Historians see a frontier of empire and piracy, of survival and exploitation, of choices that still echo outward through time. The truth lives somewhere between those two views. Tortuga was never as mythical as fiction made it. It was harsher than any myth, more ordinary, more human, more cruel. Which raises the question that the ruins never quite answer. If an island like this could become an entire world without rules, completely and in plain sight, what exactly stopped others from doing the same? Tortuga matters because of what it reveals, not about pirates, about us. When power leaves a vacuum, something always rushes in to fill it. When law grows weak, new rules appear. Crueler ones, written by whoever got there first. When wealth moves through violence long enough, violence becomes the economy. Tortuga wasn't an exception to history. It was a pattern inside it. A concentrated, unfiltered version of what happens wherever the edges of empire collapse, where the outcasts and the opportunists and the people with nothing left to lose all collide in the same desperate geography. That's why the island still pulls at us. We think we're watching a pirate story, but we're really watching the birth of a frontier. And frontiers are where societies stop performing civilization and start showing their actual face. Not polished, not noble, just exposed. Tortuga doesn't tell us that people are monsters. It tells us something harder than that. Under the right conditions, with the right pressures, the right absences, the right opportunities, ordinary people can build a world that actively rewards the worst version of themselves. And once that world exists, it is very, very hard to take apart. In the end, Tortuga was never just a pirate hideout. It was proof that order can fail, quickly, completely, and with almost no warning. It was a refuge, a marketplace, a battlefield, and a warning wrapped inside the shape of an island. Men came there to escape the world. What they built instead was a smaller version of its worst instincts, compressed, intensified, impossible to look away from. The island gave them freedom, but freedom without any restraint at all becomes something else, something heavier, something that looks like freedom from the outside and feels like a different kind of cage from within. And that is why Tortuga still lingers, Not in history books exactly, but somewhere deeper, in the part of the imagination that wonders about edges, about what lives past the last line of the map, about what kind of person you become when no one is watching and no rule applies, and the only law is what you're willing to do next. One broken harbour, one abandoned coastline, one empty law. Tortuga vanished as a pirate world. The ships rotted, the men scattered, the flags were pulled down. But the question it leaves behind is still alive, still asking, still waiting. When the rules disappear, what kind of world do we build next?